The Tenants' Rebellion. The old apartment building had seen better days, but its tenants had never seen worse. The building was in desperate need of repairs, but the greedy landlord refused to make a single improvement. The tenants put up with the neglect and poor living conditions until one day, the landlord presented them with an outrageous rent increase. The tenants were furious. They had had enough of the landlord's greed and neglect. They decided to fight back, to take a stand against the landlord's mistreatment. They rallied together, forming a tenants' union, and began to organize a revolt. First order of business was to fix the building themselves. The tenants banded together, working tirelessly to repair the leaks, fix the heating system, and clean up the building. They worked day and night, and in just a few short weeks, the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The landlord was furious when he saw what the tenants had done. He had never been challenged before, and he wasn't about to start now. He stormed into the building, threatening the tenants with eviction. But the tenants were ready. They confronted the landlord, telling him that they were no longer going to put up with his greed and neglect. The landlord laughed in their faces, telling them that they were nothing more than a bunch of desperate renters who didn't have the power to stand up to him. The tenants were undaunted, and they told the landlord that they would fight him every step of the way. The landlord continued to threaten the tenants, but they refused to back down. They were determined to fight for their rights, and they were willing to do whatever it took to win. The landlord realized that he was up against a force to be reckoned with, and he began to have second thoughts about his ruthless tactics. But it was too late. The tenants had taken control of the building, and they weren't about to let go. They told the landlord that he was no longer welcome in the building, and they warned him they would do everything in their power to protect their home. The landlord was furious, but he was also afraid. He knew that the tenants meant business, and he didn't want to face that wrath. He left the building, never to return. The tenants were jubilant, celebrating their victory over the greedy landlord. They had taken a stand against greed and neglect, and they had won. They were proud of what they had accomplished, and they were determined to keep the building as a symbol of their victory. But little did they know that their victory would come at a price. The landlord was not as defeated as he seemed. He was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for his revenge. One dark and stormy night, the tenants heard strange noises coming from the basement. They cautiously made their way down to the basement, only to find the landlord waiting for him. He was there to take his revenge, and he was not alone. The landlord had brought with him an army of the undead, a horde of zombie-like creatures that he had raised from the dead. The tenants were horrified, and they realized too late that they had made a terrible mistake. The landlord and his undead minions attacked the tenants, killing many and forcing the rest to flee for their lives. The tenants were able to escape the building, but they would never forget the horrors that they had witnessed. So they thought. Years later, the tenants learned the truth about their former landlord. He was not a greedy man, but a scientist who had discovered a cure for death. However, his experiments went wrong, and he became obsessed with power and control, using the undead as his army to control and manipulate those around him. The tenants had unknowingly stumbled upon his lair, and their defiance had sealed their fate. The tenants were never heard from again. The old apartment building was left abandoned, its doors locked and windows boarded up. The memory of the tenants' revolt and the horrors that followed was forgotten, buried by time. Years passed, and years passed. The building was renovated, and new tenants moved into the building, unaware of its dark history. They were drawn to the cheap rent and the promise of a new start, but they soon learned that they were not the first to call the building home. The new tenants began to experience strange occurrences, hearing strange noises in the night and seeing ghostly apparitions. They tried to ignore the signs, believing them to be their imagination playing tricks on them. But as the days went on, the incidents became more frequent and more terrifying. And then one day, the new tenants stumbled upon a hidden basement beneath the building. There they discovered the remains of the landlord's experiments, the same experiments that had driven the former tenants to their doom. The new tenants were horrified, and they realized too late that they had become the latest victims of a never-ending cycle of evil. The landlord's evil had not died with him. It had only been dormant, waiting for its next victims. And with each new cycle of tenants, the evil was rekindled, spreading its darkness throughout the building and its inhabitants.